Kevin is joining us by phone. All right, well, Mr. Ramey is absent today, so we'll run this meeting from the corner here. And we'll go ahead and call this, Board of Commissioners meeting for the OJRSA to order. And we're gonna have a moment of silence in remembrance of Michael Miller. And Chris, would you like to say a few words about Michael Miller before we have our moment of silence?
I never had the opportunity to meet Mr. Miller, and I just came across his obituary when I was going through the newspaper one day, and I just remembered his name as being a commissioner, and it stated in the obituary that he did serve, so I looked him up, and he served as an at-large appointee on the old Oconee County Sewer Commission from 1982 until 1986. And in your packet, I just included as a handout for everybody a copy of his obituary.
Does anyone else know Mr. Miller? Anyone here? Have you ever won here at all? You remember Mr. Miller?
Oh, yeah.
Any words of,
Good man, I'll say the good man, we were friends, he was the HR guy at Johnson Controls. He worked for many, he waited for many years, but out of college, he went and worked with Chick in Hall. Then when Johnson Controls built their battery, boss plant, him and Paul Anderson, who was the plant manager at Chick, they moved to Johnson Controls as the plant manager up there, and the HR manager. Got out of textile. He good man.
that's very good. Well, thank you for sharing. We'll just have just a moment of silence here for Mr. Miller. Okay, thank you. And show right here where we have Mr. McLean doing our invocation and our pledge.
Gracious and Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful afternoon you've given us, Lord. Lord, we thank you for all the many blessings and love you give us each and every day, Lord. And I just pray now as we get ready to leave in our meeting this afternoon, Lord, that you'll just be with us and give us guidance, and Lord, give us wisdom to make those decisions that need to be made here this afternoon. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Scott. And I will just say this, now we just all said the Pledge of Allegiance, just a reminder that tomorrow is the day to exercise those rights and privileges that we do have living in our fine country. So with that, public session, we'll move on with the agenda. Public session, is there anyone want to speak from the public? All right, hearing none, we will move on to the approval of minutes. And if you have a chance to review those, the commissioner meeting, I had a chance to review that or any kind of issues with that on October the 7th. Mr. Stowe.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second. Any other comments? Any comments good? Hearing none, all four say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed of that minutes passed. The committee and other minutes. We'll move on to the executive committee meeting, September 25th. Brian is not here. Was there anyone else that was here with those minutes in front of us? Celia, you want to report on that?
Sure.
That was a long meeting, I understand.
It was an extremely long meeting. We met on the 25th, and then I think in record time, we voted to approve the change order, and that was it. We left.
So is that a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Motion second. Any other comments? All right, all four say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. You got a delay in action right there. Right there. All right, operations and planning meeting of October 16th. committee chair, or no? Anybody else wanna do that, or you want me to do it?
You did such a great job, Bob.
Well, I appreciate that, Scott. Feels so honored here. All right, let's see, what we talked about, our current projects. If you look here, and I did cruise those real briefly, and I didn't see anything pointed out that we talked about the corrective action plans, that are moving forward. The odor complaint that we had a meeting here with DA just earlier today, right before this meeting. And, sewer use regulations update, you know, that was it was a good meeting, right? But, I'll go ahead and, Lynn, thank you for taking such fine minutes for us. I'll make a motion, we approve those minutes.
I'll second that.
Any comments? Hearing none. All four say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's move on to the finance administrative meeting, October 22nd. Sue, is that you again?
It is, thank you. Other than the financial reports and update on current projects, the only item that will move toward the board is to approve a reclassification to comply with the FLSA changes. This is for Lynn, just the one, but to go ahead and get that changed so that come January, they will, all the job classifications will be in compliance with the new FLSA rule. Otherwise, it was, discussion about what we're gonna discuss later on today, dealing with our steering committee. Anybody got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, otherwise, motion, that we approve them as presented.
Second.
Motion second, any comments? All right, hearing none, all four say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move on, thank you for that. We'll move on to the Secretary Treasurer's report. Lynn, would you like to take that one over?
The report's in your handouts instead of the breakfast time, because I didn't get it done until this morning. I apologize. We had a total of $11,685,277 combined in all the accounts with the investments. That's all broken down there on the front of your sheet. The reconciliations for September have been done by the accountant, but again, I'm waiting for her letter that says she got them done. And we have two investments. One is at the end of this month and the other one is at the beginning of December. They're both for $245,000, one from the O&M account, one from the WIF account. They're going to be relisted. And I think that's it.
One, just a question, it's probably nothing, but what's the 245, the consistent number 245, is that some sort of a?
We used to invest for $250,000 because that was the FDIC amount, but when we were taking into account the interest that we're earning on it too, we.
Backed it up?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought so. Thanks.
Is that, yeah, do we need to approve that?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion second, any other comments? All right, all four say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that passed, thank you, Lynn. All right, and we'll move on to any, Oconee County government update regarding matters involving wastewater. Anybody here that wants to speak on that?
I checked with Ms. Proctor and she wasn't be able to attend.
Okay, she didn't have anything to.
She did not.
Okay, all right, we'll move on to presentation discussion items. Presentation of our fiscal year. I saw Jason in here, so he's ready for his annual pilgrimage. So, Jason, you want me to just turn that over to you, my friend?
Thank you, Bob. All right, so, everyone should have a booklet of the audit for fiscal year 24. So these numbers are as of June 30, 2024. A lot going on last year. The book is a little bit, for the book that's a little bit thicker, I'll get into the reasons for that as we go through. I'm just gonna hit the highlights here and then answer any questions that you have, and then if you have any questions afterwards as well, our contact information here is at the top of page 1. pages 1 through 3 are what's called the independent auditor's report. Basically, this is just giving you in the wording we need to use it, the opinion that the auditor issues on the financial statements that follow. And the opinion we issued is what's called an unmodified opinion. That's detailed at the very first paragraph, or second paragraph, say on page 1. So that's the most important thing is, in the report is saying you can rely on the numbers that you see following the independent auditor's report here, and that's detailed in paragraph 2 there. So if there was any issues, we would obviously talk to the board prior to this about those. Once we get into pages 4 through 10 or so, sorry, it goes a little bit longer through 12. This is what's called the management's discussion and analysis. Some of this is required. Well, the whole narrative here is required, but the format that it's in has a little bit of leeway, and Chris does a great job in helping communicate in narrative form the financial statements that follow. Because once we get after this section here, it gets really detailed, and there's lots of numbers. So this kind of just breaks it down to the financial highlights. The first item, or first bullet point there on page 4, there was a really large increase in that position for the year. About 15.5 million of that is going to be impact fees and grants. So just to give you a summary of grant activity, there were 2 RA grants related to Sewer South. There was an EDA grant related to Sewer South during the year, which is federal money. There were SCIP grants that was started kind of later in the year. Several projects went on there. There's a ceiling there, I think of around 10 million. About $1 million of that was spent in this fiscal year. Of course, you have the feasibility study. That's another RA grant of 100,000. And then there were some funds reimbursed by the county, by Coney County, for funds that you guys fronted but was reimbursed for. Those would all be considered either grant monies or capital contributions that impact that bullet point 1 with the extremely large increase in that position there. Operating revenue, the second bullet point there, did increase from the prior year. This was another change for the year. So the way the municipalities are billed and then reimburse the authority was new for this year, and operating revenue increased. Of course, this is the first full year that that's occurred, where cities are billing the customers and then reimburse or send that back to the authority instead of direct bills to the municipalities. Operating expenses actually decreased for the year when compared to last year, and operating net income increased by about $1 million over last year.
That was timely.
As we go through management's discussion, there are some charts here. I know it's a lot of numbers to digest right off the cuff, but there's some charts that we provided here that show trends. So you can see on page 5, summary of net position, also known as the balance sheet, shows assets, liabilities, and change in that position, or sorry, yeah, we should have changed in that position there at the bottom, and there's a comparison to the previous 2 years. Page 6 does the same thing, comparison of the prior 2 years to this year for revenues, expenses. And you can see there the 6th line down, the capital contributions or grants was about 15.2 million. And then the total expense there in that section, 3rd line up from the bottom, 4th line up from the bottom, was about 5.2 million. capital assets, the section there at the bottom of page 6, obviously that increased a lot. All this grant money is going to capital projects, except for the feasibility study. So construction in progress, because Sewer South was not completed at the end of the year, June 30. There's a lot of projects kind of either towards the end or maybe just starting, and the SCIP grant was kind of just starting, but nothing placed into service as of that date, which is the key to get it out of that construction progress category and into a depreciable line item, which would go below the plants, lines, stations, and related assets. So that'll be moved down for at least a portion of that when we do the 25 audit. It's kind of just hanging out there in construction progress right now until those projects are finished up, and then it will move. Yeah, capital assets, you'll see an increase about 13.1 million. No notes on debt. There is no debt, so there's no notes there. After page 6, we get into history of the authority, policies. There's several paragraphs on economic factors, fiscal budget, what's coming up in 2025, which you guys are obviously aware of that, but other financial statement users may not be, and this is just a good place to put that for people who aren't as plugged in to know about what's going on in this current year that we're in. That's detailed on page 11. And then pages 13 through 15 are just what's called the basic financial statements, just a breakdown of those graphs that we already looked at in more detail. There's a lot of assets that the authority has between cash investments and the infrastructure, not a lot of liabilities. The main liability that the authority has are just going to be unpaid invoices at June 30. So there's a lot of contractors that have billed for the prior year that hadn't got paid as of June 30. And so those were all liabilities at the end of the year. That was about $3 million as of June 30. They were paid soon after the end of the year, but at that date, that's what was owed. And then on page 16, we get into the notes. This breaks down the numbers on the previous 3 pages into much further detail. All this is, for the most part, is just being sure the authority is compliant and has a note disclosure for everything that's required to say the audit is properly completed. And it explains, some of this is going to be very comparable to other government entities, municipalities, especially when you get to fund accounting and the basis of accounting, the details of capital assets, and the changes for the year. Like I said, no major debt, so there's no disclosures related to that as far as notes payable or bonds or anything like that. And then the last section, which is unique to this year, it will be around next year. Again, I'm fairly certain of it, is what's called a single audit. Anytime you have federal funds expended of more than $750,000 in the fiscal year, the federal government requires a single audit to be performed to make sure those funds were spent in accordance with the rules that the grant document says. And the federal government provides how to audit this on their website. So the 2 on page 37, this is called the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. There were 2 major programs this year. The EDA grant and the SCIP grant, which actually came via COVID funds, is detailed there on page 37. And this is kind of an appendix to the normal audit that we do each year. Again, the authority ran into it this year and probably will for fiscal year 25 as well. And we have to issue an opinion on internal controls over these federal awards. And again, that was an unmodified opinion, which is detailed there on pages 40 and 41. And page 42 just has what's called a summary of auditor's results. This format is just the standard format that we have to prepare it in, and there's no major items to report here to the board as far as material weaknesses or significant deficiencies on the audit or on the controls over federal awards. Like I said, I'll be happy to answer any questions now or later, if you have those.
Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome.
Is this gonna be coming out of the committee to approve, or do we approve it tonight?
I don't think it ought to be approved.
Okay.
I think it's presented.
It's just presented as it is. Darn it, I just want the county to delay us approving it, so Jason had to stay here all night. You had a question?
Yeah, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
Mr. Acting Chair.
So the chair recognizes Mr. Mower.
A couple of questions. Number one, in your management letter, I noticed you're itemizing a number of journal entries that were performed this year,
Yes.
which seems to be more excessive than typical journal entries. Was there a way we were accounting for some of the grant funds or any other funds that needed to be modified?
Yeah, thanks for
Were these
bringing
done by you or were these done by staff?
Yeah, they were done by our firm. So, and I did forget to mention, there's the loose letter that Scott's got in the audit report. That's called the charge with governance letter. So we're required to disclose to you any audit adjustments that we make and the representations by management and then disagreements we have with management or anything like that. There's nothing to note there, but we are required to provide that to you. Scott, I wouldn't say the audit adjustments are excessive from a normal year. A lot of those are cut off like June 30, like the reports you guys get are more, there's not a lot of accruals on there for accounts receivable, accounts payable, all that type of stuff. So the 3 million I referenced in accounts payable, we would work with Lynn. Lynn would actually provide a list of what the adjustment needs to be. So even though we're making the adjustment, Lynn is providing the backup for that adjustment by capturing invoices that are coming in after June 30 for services that were provided before June 30. So some of those adjustments would be just normal ones that we work with Lynn on each year to capture those numbers.
Construction in progress.
Construction in
things
progress,
like
yeah, all that type of stuff. So like there was one invoice we were waiting on from, I think, Don Moorhead that was for we didn't get one through June 30. We got one through May 31st, so we were waiting for that one to come through. But they were aware of that. We were aware of that. That delayed us a little bit, but that's just an example of one of the adjustments that we would make.
And then, Chris, I noticed that we had, from operations, we had $2.4 million worth of gained cash from the budget. And that includes the depreciation expense, which of course is a non-cash expense that we didn't budget for in our budget. So we had a net zero budget for the year. If I remember correctly, we didn't budget for a surplus. Yet we had, even if you factor in the 1.2 or 1.3 million in depreciation, we saw a $2.4 million gain in our cash balance as a result of that in our cash activities. Were there capital projects that we had budgeted for that weren't completed in that year?
I'll have to go back and check on that and see, is all of, I would imagine a considerable amount of this, and I have to go back and look and see, but I think that we severely under budgeted or underestimated what we were gonna receive in impact fees.
Well, those aren't factored in. Those are factored later on into capital contributions. If we're looking at just revenues and expenses, total operating revenue is 6.3. Total expense incorporating depreciation expense of 1.23 puts an expense at 5.2. Take out the non-cash operating depreciation expense. That's our operating income gain at 2.4 $2.4 million.
Let's go take a,
And if we look at the net increase in cash and cash equivalents, we got a $2.7 million increase in cash equivalents. So my question is, were the capitalized items taken out of that and factored in later? Were they, maybe Jason can answer that part, or I know you capitalize capital assets, so is there capital assets there that we purchased in the budget that were capitalized and not incorporated into the operating activity?
Yeah, so, well, anything that's capitalized would factor into that depreciation expense number, which, you're saying, as you know, is not a cash number.
Correct.
There is for sure, just like the change in net position, 16.5 million this year, is going to flip because you've got all this grant money coming in. You've got projects that you haven't even started recognizing depreciation expense on yet because they're not placed in service. So those funds that are coming in to pay contractors are just kind of being banked up there as a fixed asset, but there's no expense being taken on them yet because they're not placed in service. I don't think that answers your cash question.
No, because the capital contributions is labeled later, right? I mean, that's where you factor in your
Yes,
capital
that's right.
income and your grant income and your capital expense going out from those funds.
Right.
And the impact fee is a restricted account that's also accounted for there.
Right.
I'm looking at pure operations. I mean,
Yep.
if you look at a pure cash accounting standpoint, we made $2.4 million. Really 2.7, but I haven't noticed the fact that we got the 300,000 came in, and it made the investments of 289. But I'm just trying to curious of when we budget for a net zero, revenues and expenses, unless the revenues just came way $2 million over, we saw a $2.4 million gain in the year. Are there things we didn't spend the money on that we were supposed to that are going to carry over that will catch up to this year? Or what? That's just a question.
yeah, I'll have to go and take a look and get back with you on that.
Scott, I would say probably, but that 2.7, I mean, that is just cash. When you look at that, the page 15, statement of cash flows, that is what that statement's trying to explain to the financial statement user is, as you know, here's where you started the year, here's where you ended the year. I would assume there's stuff that was budgeted for that did not get spent on, but I don't, like you said, but you have to look into that and see.
Take a look at
That's
it.
fine. And like I said, if you look back on page 14, you've got your operational activity, right? And you got a net income of 980 grand that's based off that operational activity for the year. But then if you factor in that non-cash depreciation expense, which you netted out your capital expenses for the year, 1.2 million, that puts us at $2.3 million worth of net gain, just in operational activity.
Right.
Then I always use the cash balance to verify that, and I see here we got a $2.7 million increase in cash equivalent.
Yeah.
So you do have some, post June 30th expenses that haven't come out of that cash yet, right? I mean, I get that, but there's adjustments for that in your accrual basis. I just wonder why we had a gain of $2.4 million for the year. That's all.
That accounts payable, $3 million. I'm just speculating here, but if you go back and look at it, there's $3 million of accounts payable due to contractors at June 30 that was paid July, August, September. I'm not sure what that would have done to cash because you just have to look at the bank statements and see, because obviously those months you're having revenue come in as well. But yeah, there's a lot of unpaid expenses at year end, $3 million worth.
Are those accounted for as balance sheet and where?
Yeah, those are, if you look at page 13, maybe, 13, that first, kind of down the middle of the page, we saw the dollar sign there, accounts payable of just over 3 million. So, and a lot of that has to do with when are you gonna get the invoices from the contractor? Because they may bill you in August for May services or June services, but
it's a majority of that from the construction in progress,
it would be.
which wouldn't be accounted for in the operational portion of it.
And I'm just, without me going
We can go
and
over
pulling
it.
information,
Yeah.
could it have to do, Jason,
We'll go
with the monies we receive in the reimbursement grant, plus the monies we're receiving from Oconee County that we had that long conversation about a week or two ago, where, and as we stated here, we know that Oconee County's contributed more to it, and we're gonna have to end up cutting them a refund. Could that very well be what?
It wouldn't affect the cash increase that Scott's talking about, because that'll be a non-cash item. That's just, at June 30, that might be amounts that are due to the authority, but it wouldn't affect like cash you have in your hands. And what Scott's saying, I think, is he's saying there's this large increase in cash for the year. Let's just say 2.7 million. And so my guess is, when you look at the details, we know also that, yes, the cash increased that much, but you also have $3 million of invoices to pay as of June 30 too. So I'm not sure what that did to cash over the next several months, because we didn't, go way into
And only
2025.
the reason I'm looking, I'm just looking at strictly what we had in the accounts, and on May 31st, we had in just that unrestricted R&M or retail O&M fund, we had right at $1 million, and then sometime between then and June 30th, we must have gotten hit with a reimbursement from one of the, I'm gonna assume EDA, that spiked that up to $3.5 million. And we're still around that in that account right now.
Oh yeah, that could be a factor. You'd have to dive into the details a little bit to see. Because yeah, that's gonna be a fluid number for sure, with all the large payments y'all have going out, and grant money's coming in, and then y'all having to match some of that, and then Cook County County's reimbursing you for that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on for sure. So yeah, that would be a fluid number.
Jason, you can work with Chris to get those clarified.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll yeah, all right. Anyone else? Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah, good to see y'all. Thank you.
You don't wanna hang around, what's going on?
Got youth basketball.
Yeah.
See y'all. Thank you.
Good. All right, let's move on to our action items. Number one, authorize the executive director to execute corrective sewer infrastructure easement agreement for the Seneca Creek Pump Station Force Main Project. Chris.
All right, in your package, you have an Exhibit A, and what this is just a correction for a tax map parcel number. And Mr. Brandt he's worked with Mr. Root on addressing this. And I don't know if there's anything you need to add, but it basically is just correcting a mistake that was made on the original easement for the Seneca Creek Force Main.
I got it, yeah. There was an error made, to start with, and we just got trying to straighten it out.
What was the error?
I don't remember.
I think it's right
but
here.
What they did was,
520 instead of 540.
It was 540 and.
yeah, the
It's
tax
65.
map number was wrong. It was quoted. Yeah.
First
Yeah.
page.
Thank you.
I make a motion, we approve.
All right. Motion and second. Any other comments? All right, all four say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, Chris, approved pay, item number two, approved pay classification to comply with the FLSA changes regarding non-exempt compensation as recommended by the FGP with effective date of January 1. Chris.
Exhibit B in your packet, this is what Ms. Myers had mentioned a little while ago that was discussed in the F&A committee, and it's just to have us be in compliance at all levels within that pay range for the single position, which is the office manager position.
Any motion to approve this?
So moved.
So here's-
Second.
Second, we have a motion and a second. Okay, is there any comments or questions? Seems straightforward, we'll go ahead and move on then. This is,
You gonna vote?
motion approved. Okay, good. All four say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Number three, approved members for the sewer feasibility implementation ad hoc committee. Angie,
Yes,
Valerie,
hi there.
welcome. You're
Thanks.
sitting behind me.
I am. I moved it, but that side was full tonight, so I just decided to get a view from the other side of the room. So I think, Chris, you provided them with the memo, correct?
I did.
So I'm not gonna read the whole memo, but, what we did is we contacted, everyone that was recommended for those 5 spots that were not appointed by the members of the current board. And we reached out to everybody. We had some folks that declined. Everybody was first very, flattered and, that they were even considered. We had some folks back out, like I said, due to potential conflicts or other reasons. And then once we kind of went through that, Catherine Amadon and I reviewed all of the candidates. There was only one spot that, due to either someone backing out or other potential conflicts, that we did not have someone for. So I reached out to Scott Willett with Anderson Joint Regional, and many of you may know him. But Anderson Joint is another regional utility that's organized under the same law that you guys are organized under. And Scott is, his background is in finance. So he's the executive director of Anderson Joint, but has a background in finance. So when I reached out to him, he was very, very quick to agree and willing to participate. I will say that everybody I talked to, I let them know about the stipend that you guys offered. Not to say that they won't take it, but that was not a factor for anybody at all. Everybody that we spoke with was on board and just wanted to participate and help. So those 5, as we've got them down here, are, and I will say that that most of these individuals can weigh in on any of the topics based on their backgrounds. We just put them in specific roles, but they are very, and most of them you know, but Sue Snyder, River Stillwell, Scott Willett, Joel Jones, Graham Rich, and then Chip Bentley from the COG will be the ex officio facilitator. We did give you kind of some recommendations for since there were multiple potential appointees from each of you, but ultimately that's up to you guys to set who you want on this committee. Our charge was those other 5, and so that's who we have recommended. I think that, again, all of those individuals felt like they had no conflict of interest. We were really trying to look for folks that were outside of not having been involved in Oconee County within, as much as we possibly could. So I think this group will bring a wide and very expert skill set to this committee for you guys. So lots of experience, lots of tenure.
Very good.
Any questions?
Is Mr. Willett still a member of the Anderson Regional Organization?
Yes.
He's not retired.
Yeah. He is slowly, I think he's got one foot out. He's slowly backing out, but he is not fully retired yet. So, and I did tell them, I know your next topic is to talk about the setting the day. I did tell them that that maybe what you guys would do is reach out. I mean, you can probably set a target date, but that once the committee was set, that y'all would reach out and determine the best day and times that work for everybody. Of course, Graham and Sue are retired, so I think they're pretty flexible. But it was really good to hear everybody was willing to serve in this capacity, so it's good.
Any questions for Angie? Angie, I would say that I know some of these very, very well, and I know all of them, to some extent. But this is a pretty impressive little group of people here.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they're gonna bring is their experience in dealing with some of the challenges that you guys are having and how they were able to navigate some of that. So.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Sure, thank y'all.
Well, do I hear a motion to accept these, recommendations for the committee?
Yes, I make a motion that we recommend this, approve these recommendations.
Does that include the one that you recommended plus our representatives above?
Yeah, and again, if y'all are, that was one grouping that kind of got the mix of administrative, utility operations and, et cetera. So, but, I mean, that's your call, and I want you guys to feel
I just
comfortable.
want to, yeah, so your
Yeah.
motion was for both groupings? All right, I'll second.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Any other comments? Thoughts? Okay, everyone for, say aye.
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 Any against? Very good.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Very good. Angie, thank you so much for all that.
You're very
I think
welcome.
that was a lot of fun for you. All right, we'll move on to item number 4. So set a date and location for the first meeting for the sewer feasibility implementation ad hoc committee.
I don't know that we're gonna be able to do that today, but I'm gonna ask Ms. Metlin, with your timeline of what we need to meet to comply with being able to
Right.
get everything done, is there any recommended time that you feel we need to get this going and have that first meeting by?
So, I mean, honestly, I would say if y'all could get a meeting set sometime in November, it would be good. But if it has to be between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I think that will be fine too. You're really waiting on, before a lot of work can be done, you're waiting on that information from, Lawrence to come in about the two paths and that sort of thing. So the first meeting would almost just be kind of a meet and greet organizational type meeting.
And obviously, they're gonna need to be brought up to speed on the study.
I shared everybody that's on the committee. I sent them the link to the study so that they could, review it and be up to speed on it, so.
Oh, the crowd just makes me smile, this committee. I feel good. Do you feel good about it,
I
Chris?
do.
Yeah.
I'll have somebody reach out to everybody, we'll go ahead and get email addresses, find out when we'll be able to.
Yeah, and I can share, so I've got, like, Sue and Graham's are their personal, I'll share those with you.
Okay.
And, yeah, so.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and say, please don't do the 15th.
Yeah.
I can go ahead and tell you, I can't do 15th.
Already making demands. All right, you ready to move on?
Yes, sir, I am.
Let's do it. Executive Director discussion. Number 1, environmental regulatory compliance.
Okay, item 1, this has to do with the consent order. We've got our biannual report that's due to the South Carolina Department of Environmental Services at the end of this week. So this is, one of these things is we have to provide it to them about every 180 days. So that will be looking back at what we've accomplished over the last half a year, as well as what we anticipate going forward for the next half year. So one due now, then one the next will be due, I believe it's the 10th of May. We had a number of issues during the storm where we had particularly manholes that were inundated by floodwaters, and the so-called 50-year flood is no longer a 50-year, 100-year flood, since I think I've seen 3 or 4 of these in my time here.
Time flies.
So,
Or you're 65, one of the
that's
other.
right. So what has been done at the request of, I keep wanting to call them DHEC now, but DES, and just what we had mentioned before that was on that list, that after action list that we had put together, is we're gonna have to get together at some point in time internally, and as well as with some consultants that can identify an appropriate flood stage or flood level elevation to possibly go and raise some of these manholes to, and or make them watertight and extend a vent or you know, a candy cane type of ventilation unit from these manholes to above that flood level. Because, you know, what happens is, and you can still tell if you drive across a bridge and look out to that field to the west, that field was substantially underwater, and those manholes, you couldn't see the tops of them. They were underwater, so all we were doing was pumping that creek into the plant and filling up that basin out back. So, and that's just the areas we know about. We don't know what the elevation is and what we need to hit as we go up through that trunk sewer. And lastly, in that regard, Mr. Ferris mentioned it a few moments ago, we had a meeting with DES earlier today to continue to address the odor complaints that we received from the Wexford Davis Creek Road community. And I'm pleased with the numbers. And we had this came up at the O&P committee meeting where the first chance I had seen any of the graphs. I think any of us had seen any of the graphs from the data. And everything appears to be trending in the right direction with hydrogen sulfide. But I think now we're at kind of a difficult stretch because the odor is still present, and it's just trying to figure out how to get that odor down below that threshold, if not eliminated altogether. So they've asked us to put together a general plan, and we're going to be working on that. I think we are, Seneca Light and Water is, and just provide that information to them. There's a number of, you know, there's still ways to go, but options that we have in place that we can look at. So that's all I have with item 1. Any questions about environmental compliance?
Well, during the L&P meeting, some of the graphs that Kyle showed, and they were adding, you know, they were starting to dial in the chemical addition, and the graph was just almost flatlined in there. So that's the way you're going to continue with that chemical addition as you move forward, I assume.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's still the plan, as we talked about earlier today in that group. It's always going to be a moving target because a change in the temperature of the wastewater is going to affect it. A change in the temperature of the atmospheric, or just atmospheric conditions in general, are going to affect the odor. We just don't know what the answer is. And just because if we see a number at 1 part per million, which compared to some of those peaks, you know, that may have been in the hundreds that we saw, 1 part per million is still above that odor threshold for hydrogen sulfide. So it's how do we get that down? And the numbers that we have that we reported on were more of a extreme number, if you will, because I believe those numbers were for meters that we had actually in the manholes themselves. So closed system, you know, limited ventilation. So we're going to see the higher numbers in there. So we were curious about what we were going to see in the atmospheric conditions. So we have a parts per billion meter currently, and we had gone and set that up. We set it up a few weeks ago at the pump station, and we had a few, I'll call them a hit there, but when we moved it onto the trunk or onto the gravity sewer up behind some of the homes, we saw even much more elevated numbers at those locations. That was about, what, 4 feet high or so off the ground, Kyle? So it's now trying to figure out how to get those numbers down. But, you know, now we're measuring and looking at numbers in the parts per billion as opposed to parts per million, which we were looking at before.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris.
That's it for number 1. You
Okay.
keep on,
Yeah,
just keep on trucking.
Sure.
Okay, number 2, sewer feasibility implementation rate and cost of service study. So I had received the information from Willdan back on or around October 21st for what they proposed to do with the study. That information was then shared with the city administrators on or around, I think maybe the same day that I had received it. So now that anyone here may have had the opportunity to glance that over, I don't know if you had any questions, especially maybe even more so for Angie, that she may be able or need to address, or for me to reach out to Daryl Parker. But I think it was decided or discussed at the last meeting that it would probably be best for everyone to do their own independent study as to doing one collectively. But I believe that, am I mistaken, Angie, that everyone would certainly need to take into account the basis of what we did
That is
with their
correct.
study?
And for your studies, we would love for them to be set up similarly, meaning the same, kind of doing the same process that's going on with this one, so that it's.
Don't we
There's
almost
that one.
need your results before we do
Yes,
ours?
you do.
So we can't start ours until,
That's probably a question, that we can ask, Wildan. I think you could probably do some stuff, and get going, but yes, you will need the ultimate, what comes out of OGRSA to plug in before they can finalize yours.
Right.
So, yeah.
Any other questions about item 2?
And I will say, because of how everybody's enterprise funds are set up, they're different. So it's gonna be a little bit different for each one, but I think, depending on who you have do them, you can share this scope so that they understand what we're targeting here.
All right. Number 3, Sewer South Phase 2 update. Okay, this is one that I wanted to make sure I had a copy of a letter here to provide to you. So handout number 3, and I think there may be a couple of extra copies that are behind me up here. They're in that whole packet, I believe. We currently are still awaiting the permit to operate for that system. We have been asked to extend the contract by Moorhead Construction again, and I believe that was done recently. It is in that the executive committee voted to extend that back in September, and we were asked to do so again. After speaking with the engineers, after speaking with COG, and my own personal thoughts, observations, and opinions are that we do not need to do that. That contract that expired October 29, we are still waiting on information from the engineers, and a lot of it is items that we could handle under warranty is some of the things that they've asked for, but the one that we cannot is for the record drawings. So in order to get the permit to operate for the system, the engineer and the Department of Environmental Services will need to have a complete set of accurate record drawings from the contractor for that project. And that's what we are still waiting on today. So we again feel that their request is not warranted. Davis and Floyd has reached out to them, from what I understand, numerous times, asking them to have us to get the surveyor to wrap up that part of that project. And with that all said, that we are now in the liquidated damages phase of that of the project. So $750 per day is stated in that letter. Now that letter was sent as a notice by John Reynolds, and it's dated October 23rd, and I believe he sent out the 24th to Moorhead, and they have acknowledged it by email to the group. So that's where we are now. We're, again, we were hoping to have this thing, and I think I said publicly, once I had confidence, we had confidence from the engineer that I felt that we were gonna have that permit to operate in hand before I got back from my trip over the summer in June. They said, yes, into June, you should have flow on that line. Here we are now in November and still waiting on this. So I felt it was time to go ahead and give a full update now that the contract has expired as to what's going on with that project right now.
Is, Mr. Moorhead pushing back on anything?
I don't think they have, not if they have, it hadn't been to me, but nothing that I've seen so far. The request they made to us, they stated that they weren't able to do some punch list items because of the storm. Well, they had all the punch, if that indeed delayed them, I think they asked for 8 additional days, I can't remember exactly what it was. But if that indeed delayed them, it wasn't a substantial delay because they ended up, from what I understand, they had all the punch list items completed by October 29th anyway, so there wasn't really a delay. They were able to get all of that completed within the time frame of the contract. The biggest ask really is for the record drawings.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
Are they substantially changed since the original drawings?
That, I can't
Okay.
answer that because
I
that's,
wouldn't think so.
the engineer would know the answer to that. There have been, I'm sure there have been some field changes. In fact, I know there's been some field changes where, you can remember, we had to go and obtain a second, a little bit wider of an easement to accommodate at their request. So I know there is gonna be a few things in there, but what there is, I don't know.
Are we holding any of the funds back from them before final payment?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay, got that carried out there?
Yes, sir.
What's that date that the LDs begin?
30th?
The 30th?
Yes, sir.
So the clock's running.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's on the back page, Marty, it's just right the second line.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for right now.
All right, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move on into commissioners' discussion, and Brian's not here, so he got nothing to discuss. Anybody else? All right, very good. Hearing none, we're going to upcoming meetings. What?
Not the thing,
No,
I like the way you
I've
think.
got to go. Upcoming meetings here, operation and planning, we good for the 20th, is that still good for everybody? All right, we'll keep that. Looks like the finance committee is canceled, and the board of commissioners meeting on December 2nd, there may be a conflict with us, folks from Seneca on that one.
That's our parade night.
What if it was kept, how short is too long?
We start at 4 o'clock.
You might reschedule the parade.
He don't got Santa Claus, so he got to go.
I'm looking at that, you don't put this and put it in the hill here, I'm just telling you. He's gonna put some syrup on you.
So we won't be here.
Well, it'd be a night to get stuff done, you know?
Well, I'm sitting there even, as we talk about the O and P, I can't think of anything that's gonna be on the O and P agenda, so that may be a meeting that I request that you not have anyway, so.
We just want to cancel the board meeting, is that what you're saying?
We can cancel it, or we can
Well,
say if we maybe reschedule it for another day. if
Brian's
we
not
need
here,
to.
we can do what we want.
So,
Let's go get a beer.
No, I don't know, does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I mean, you're welcome to meet without us, you'll still have a majority.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a steering committee that we're scheduling anyway, so we can just do a steering committee, and then that way we've got something to talk about for the meeting room.
but if we have something,
He's trying to save at least some of us from next
You
meeting.
got, as far as the O and P, you've got till the 20th, I mean, we can, it's only the 4th.
Right.
Plenty of time to figure out one way or the other. I'll plan for it.
And if we have to move it to the 9th? Does that mess anybody up?
No,
Just to leave that?
I won't be here, I'll be out of town. But that doesn't matter either.
Let's think of December, man, December's rough,
Mhm.
and it goes by in a hurry too.
How about we just plan not having one, and then if something comes up, we can do a special call.
Yeah, I'll pay that form of a motion.
Is that the
Vote on it.
board, or is that the O&P? I'm confusing.
The board.
Board.
Board, yeah.
I don't know why you're confused, we've only bounced around.
It is basketball season.
Is that completely, clear?
No,
That's
but we got till the 20th to figure it out.
Right. Alright. Then you gonna work with the ad hoc committee folks. And you on the meeting, okay, very good. Alright, that's all we've got on our agenda. Everybody good to go? We'll stand adjourned. We're out of here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Angie, thank you.
You're very welcome. I just want y'all to know how much that I really, like hanging out with y'all, cause I drove from Raleigh to get
Oh,
here.
did you really? You're
You could have done
young.
that by phone.
Well, I called Chris, I was on my way out, and I was like,